Greenland is the world's largest island, over 3 times the size of Texas, but fewer people live there than in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Why? You might think it's obvious. It's cold, it's remote, basically one giant ice cube. But the real story is a lot messier. So let's explore this frozen giant and see what makes people stay and what pushes them away. And if you like these weekly map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because my retirement plan currently involves wishful thinking. Greenland's been lying to you. It's not that green. It's more of a blinding white. 80% of the island is covered in ice. But not just any ice, an ice sheet up to 1.9 miles thick in some spots. Half the height of Mount Kilimanjaro, but a lot colder and flatter. There's soil lurking under it, as well as mountains, canyons, and a whole lot of other features. But farming? Forget about it. Turns out the branding team oversold it. Greenland was green 2.5 million years ago, and now, just like that one Walt Disney rumor, all that greenness has been cryogenically frozen since then. Greenland's glaciers double as iceberg factories. They dump giant chunks into the North Atlantic, leaving ships to play dodgeball. Titanic? Yeah, let's go ahead and pin that one on Greenland. Icebergs can be as tall as New York City apartment towers. The big difference? You don't need 6 roommates to afford one. And remember, that's just the tip. 90% of the berg is still underwater. Icebergs aren't just sinking ships. They're also sinking Greenland's trade. Well, kind of. But I'll get into that iceberg-sized problem later. On the island, residents squeeze onto a thin coastal strip. But Greenland is huge, though. Over 836,000 square miles. The ice-free land still adds up to the size of Sweden, but just without IKEA. And even that thin coastal strip, parts of it are useless too. The southeast is so bleak, even wildlife stays clear. And since that's what Europeans landed on first, they figured Greenland was hopeless. When you scare off history's most aggressive colonizers, your geography's doing something right. In those coastal communities, people make their living fishing and more fishing. Oh, and whaling, so big fishing. Turns out Greenland doesn't have many industries keeping it afloat, except a surprising one. But that might actually be a headache. Stick around for that mess. Even the animal kingdom gives southeast Greenland the cold shoulder. Muskox, they're fine up north. Caribou, plenty of them out west. But in the southeast, nothing. Just ice and bleak vibes. Even the small Arctic hare doesn't want to make a home here. Why? Well, first off, this part of Greenland gets pummeled with snow. And we're not talking a snow day kind of snow. We're talking 11 billion metric tons of the stuff. All of it dumped in one megastorm in March of 2022. It snowed so much in Greenland that it briefly stopped the island's ice sheet from shrinking. Take that, climate change. So why do storms hit here? Local currents from the southeast basically steer every storm right into it. Winds, atmospheric rivers, snow, all delivered to the same unlucky address. As if blizzards weren't enough, Greenland's southeast also gets downslope winds. Picture super cooled air deciding gravity's a fun ride and hurling itself toward the Atlantic, slamming the coast with hurricane force. These are called katabatic winds by scientists. Locals call them pitarak, which means wind which attacks you. Everyone else just calls them a reason to move literally anywhere else. These winds flip ships and set off avalanches. If you live on the coast, you're not settling down. You're pre-ordering a burial. No wonder the animals stay away. Okay, so you don't always get strong winds in this part of Greenland, but when you do, they'll knock you off your feet because they can reach 160 miles an hour. One Pitarak event in 1970 blew half the town of Tasiilaq apart. No surprise, since those are Category 5 hurricane wind speeds. Basically, Greenland's wind god woke up and chose violence. At least 15 times a year, winds will pass 40 miles an hour, sometimes a lot more. Bad news for anyone in their way. When southeast winds cross the ice sheet and tumble down the west side, they get a rebrand, Fane winds. They can crank winter temps up by 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Life on the West Coast upgrades from freeze off your limbs to just lose your fingers cold. This is why people actually manage to live on Greenland's west and southwest coast. Manage being the key word. It's survivable. Not exactly comfortable. But it's not just the geography on Greenland that's problematic. It's the location. Really far away from, well, anything. Greenland is sandwiched between the Arctic and North Atlantic Ocean. The closest landmass is Canada, but not Toronto and Vancouver, Canada. More like tundra and windswept snowstorm Canada. Arctic Norway and Sweden have Europe. They're connected to highways and ports. Greenland has ocean. Lots and lots of ocean. The closest Canadian city to Greenland? Iqaluit. Have you heard of it? Probably not. It's got a population of almost 7,400 people. Not exactly a booming town. And even Iqaluit is almost 500 miles away from Greenland's capital. Getting there is also challenging. It's not a commute, it's an ordeal. You have to cross some of the stormiest waters on Earth. Squalls, rogue waves, and a non-stop reminder that the sea doesn't want you there. In the winter, more than 10% of all waves are over 12 feet tall. Over 2 times an average person's height, unless you're a short king. I see you from up here. Now imagine sailing through stormy seas and freezing water. Fall in and it's between 30 Fahrenheit and 43 Fahrenheit. That's hypothermia in under 10 minutes. And since hypothermia knocks you out, good luck doggy paddling over 12-foot waves while unconscious. And that's before the multiple, multi-ton icebergs. Average weight of an iceberg in the Grand Banks area, 100,000 to 200,000 tons, and the size of a 15-story building. And that's just the regular ones. The big boys don't mess around. Some weigh up to 10 million tons. One even parked itself next to a Greenlandic town a few years back. Storms, freezing water, icebergs the size of Pisa's Leaning Tower weighing more than 8 Statues of Liberty. Not exactly prime shipping lanes. That's why Greenland is as connected as your uncle's flip phone. With modern transportation and technology, you'd expect reaching Greenland to be much easier, right? Right? Well, you'd be surprised. Greenland's weather changes faster than your Netflix queue. Fog, winds, and icy storms roll in within hours. Flights are frequently delayed or canceled for days. Even Nuuk, the capital, gets grounded by coastal storms. And boats can't work as a backup in the winter months. But I'll get to that. Honestly, it's impressive anyone showed up in Greenland to begin with. The first Paleo-Inuit landed 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. The Sakak people arrived around 2500 BC, then pulled a disappearing act by 800 BC. No one's sure why. Over the years, at least 6 different Inuit cultures came and went, plus some Norse adventurers led by Eric the Red, who clearly needed better vacation ideas. The Norse picked a lucky window to try Greenland. They arrived during the medieval warm period. Extra sunshine and fewer volcanic eruptions made winters in the North Atlantic unusually mild. It made Greenland look almost livable. The ice sheet ghosted for a while. When Eric the Red landed in southern Greenland, it actually looked a little green. Maybe he wasn't totally lying, but he also needed a sales pitch. Come to Greenland sounds a lot better than frozen Misery Island. So he hyped it up back in Iceland and convinced people to join him. They arrived to find one of the coldest places on Earth. Surprise! By 1400 to 1500 AD, the Norse were gone. The warm period ended and the cold came back. That meant their economy tanked. Their biggest moneymaker, walrus ivory. But Europe switched to elephant ivory and Greenland was finished. The Vikings never stood a chance. They lacked the tools, the skills, the knowledge the Inuit had spent centuries perfecting. And it wasn't just them. No outside civilization really knew how to survive there. The Vikings had it easy. The Gulf Stream kept their waters open year-round. Greenland? No such luck. The sea froze solid. The Inuit adapted brilliantly. They invented the kayak, zipping between ice packs to hunt seals. When winter finally slammed the door shut, they just switched tactics. The Inuit turned seal hunting into an art form. Dogs helped them sniff out breathing holes in the ice. Then, hunters placed a hair over the opening. When it twitched, a seal was nearby. If they couldn't see, they pressed an ear to the ice and listened for hours. People were way more patient before the internet. Once the seal showed up, they'd spear it with a toggling harpoon. This was invented over 1,000 years ago. The head stuck in the seal and the shaft would pop free. Suddenly, it was tug of war on ice, way more intense than the playground version. Honestly, sounds way too tiring for a meal. No wonder no one wanted to move there. Meanwhile, the Vikings were still figuring out how to not die in snowdrifts. The Inuit were also better at dealing with predators, like polar bears. Today, there are 4,400 danger bears roaming around, one for every 10 Greenlanders. Don't love those odds. The Inuit built bows out of muskox horn, tough enough to drop a polar bear. The Vikings? Despite their rep as fearsome raiders, most were just farmers with swords. Like we mentioned earlier, farming really doesn't work here. Even the Inuits' clothing was better. The women used caribou fur, which totally slayed, and it kept out the cold far better than the Vikings' woolen clothes. When the temperature dips to -40 Fahrenheit, that difference isn't just comfort, it's survival. Inuit women made clothing with sinew in double rows of tiny stitches. When the sinew got wet, it swelled shut, instant waterproofing. Meanwhile, Vikings were probably arguing about whether damp wool counted as weather-resistant. The Inuit developed these weapons, clothes, and hunting techniques over generations. The Norse showed up with farm gear and sweaters. Guess who lasted longer? For them, Greenland wasn't just exhausting. It was an express ticket to Valhalla. The Thule showed up in the 1200s and shrugged off the conditions that wiped out the Norse. Their descendants are still there today. Around 88% of Greenland's population is Inuit. Survival meant small, scattered communities. Greenland's ice, lack of farmland, and brutal cold made big settlements impossible. Inuit communities thrive in Greenland's climate and food culture. For everyone else, life here is harder. Are the Inuit just tougher? Maybe their genes give them cold resistance, like built-in thermal underwear. One study found the Inuit carry gene variants that let their bodies make brown fat, the kind that actually generates heat. Good for them. Most of us just have the useless kind that sits around reminding us we should probably eat a salad. Scientists think the Inuit got these genes from the Denisovans, an offshoot of humanity that split off 500,000 years ago. The Inuit won the genetic lottery before the Denisovans dipped. The rest of us also have brown fat, but mostly as newborns. Good to know, a 3-month-old can stand the cold more than us. The Inuit diet isn't exactly farm to table. It's whales, seals, and fish. Luckily, they've got genetic mutations that let them process omega-3 fatty acids from those animals. Me? I've got DoorDash on speed dial. Nearly 100% of Greenlandic Inuit have these genes, and 15% of Han Chinese, too. Europeans? A measly 2%. Which is why brie and parmesan cling to European waistlines like shrink wrap. Want the full science lesson on this? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, those genes also allow Inuit to stay healthy on a steady diet of fat. I tried the same thing, and my doctor ignores me now. So how does this tie back to Greenland's tiny population? Because the Inuit are the only ones truly built for it. There are only around 150,000 to 160,000 Inuit in the world. A third already live in Greenland. Everyone else, the cold, the diet, the conditions, it's like the island itself is saying, don't bother. Which is why the Norse bailed while the Thule stayed. Not that Europeans didn't try again in Greenland. In 1500, Portuguese explorer Corte Real went looking for a northwest passage. When he reached Greenland, the whole thing was iced over. So he detoured to Newfoundland, then went home and complained about Greenland's frozen seas. It was the world's first 1-star Yelp review, which kept other Europeans away. But Portugal did claim Greenland for a while in 1499, calling it Terra do Lavrador. They didn't hang on to it. 2 centuries later, Denmark swooped in, and technically Greenland's still part of Denmark, though with a strong dose of home rule. It's like living with your parents, but paying your own bills. Danish missionary Hans Gade arrived in Greenland searching for Norse settlers, who had already been gone for 200 years. That's how isolated Greenland was. Denmark then grabbed it from Portugal with zero pushback, mainly because nobody was lining up to colonize a frozen wasteland with no farmland. The Danes had the reverse luck of the Vikings. Eric the Red showed up during the medieval warm period. The sun was shining, the grass was greener. Hans Gade arrived right in the middle of the Little Ice Age. In 1776, Denmark locked down Greenland with a trade monopoly that lasted until 1950. And there's a reason for that. No cotton, no tobacco, no gold. Just ice. Not exactly the kind of colony Europe was racing to snatch. Greenland does have a lot of precious minerals, though, especially for today's industries. But they also haven't helped boost the economy. I'll get into that in a minute. In the 1950s, Denmark decided to modernize Greenland. Translation: force people out of their coastal villages and into Nuuk. Why? To make them more Danish. The result: the collapse of traditional Inuit communities. Oh, and a whole lot of generational problems. Greenland has the highest suicide rate in the world. Turns out, you can't just bulldoze centuries of culture and expect everyone to smile about it. Today, the capital of Nuuk is by far the biggest city. 40% of Greenland lives there, and as of 2023, around 19,800 people, less than your average Taylor Swift concert. Its population density is 0.36 people per square mile. It's the least densely populated place in the world. The runner-up is Mongolia, with 5.5 people per square mile. That's over 15 times denser than Greenland. And Mongolia is mostly desert, steppe, and Genghis Khan descendants. But hey, aren't we all? Greenland sits next to the northernmost reaches of Canada, aka the place where almost no one lives, aka Tundraland. Even its southern tip lines up with balmy Anchorage, Alaska. Not exactly palm trees and cocktails. No wonder Eric the Red had to gaslight people into moving there. 2/3 of the island, above the Arctic Circle, right in the polar zone. Arctic winters are brutal, sometimes plunging to -58 degrees Fahrenheit. The average? 10 degrees Fahrenheit between January and March, and Nuuk summers limp along at 46 degrees Fahrenheit. The average year-round temperature in the capital, 31 degrees, the kind of weather that would wipe out half of Los Angeles. And here's another reason people don't crowd Greenland's coasts. It barely rains up north. The Northeast is technically an Arctic desert. It gets less rainfall than the Sahara, and fewer camels. In the south, where most people live, it's much better, around 35 inches annually, the same as Chicago. Down in the wetter south, farming is still on hard mode. The only thing that works? Sheep, and only at Greenland's southernmost tip. And then there's the soil, which is lousy. In 2022, only 0.6% of Greenland's land was used for agriculture. That makes it one of the countries with the least arable land in the world. I guess it's good to be known for something, though. Glaciers really did a number on Greenland. They stripped off most of the soil, leaving behind rock-hard, pun intended, bedrock. In the south and west, you're basically gardening on solid rock. Down here, the ground's 3.8 billion years old. Great for geology bragging rights, but terrible for farming. Okay, maybe I'm being too hard on Greenland. There is some soil in the south, described as acidic and coarsely textured. It's also afraid of water. Great. A study of 23 cultivated sites in South Greenland found 99% was hydrophobic. 98% was extremely hydrophobic. Greenland's dirt has some commitment issues. This has made another resource very hard to grow and find in Greenland. Take a look at an aerial view of Greenland. Notice something missing? Trees. The World Bank says only 0.00054% of Greenland is forested. Basically, just Tsinghua Valley in the south. A percentage so tiny, most reports just round it down to zero. Any ideas why? It's not the cold. Exposed bedrock is one reason. The lack of quality soil is another. Fancy one more? Greenland's way too far from any seed-rich neighborhood. Russia, birds and wind can spread seeds from lush regions across the country. Greenland's closest neighbor, the Canadian tundra, not exactly a friendly seed donor. The nearest greenery is 500 miles in Iqaluit and nearly 850 miles in Newfoundland and Labrador. Way too far for birds or wind to do Greenland any favors. No trees means no timber and no easy fires. But the Inuit had a hack: seal fat oil. It kept their homes lit and warm. Forget use every part of the buffalo, they used every part of the seal. So, there's little farming, no timber. What other industries does Greenland support? Great question. The answer is not a whole lot. Yet another reason people don't live there. There just isn't enough of an economy and jobs to support them. The number one industry is fishing. Fish and fish products made up 87% of Greenland's exports in 2019. Seals and whales can't be exported because of their protected status. They have to be eaten locally, and there's a quota of how many can be hunted, which means Greenland imports nearly all of its food. Result, one of the most expensive places to live on Earth. Cost of living 44% higher than the US. A family of 4, over $6,000 a month, not including rent. And milk, $10 a gallon. Welcome to Greenland. And it makes sense. Nothing can be made locally. There's barely any infrastructure to move it around. Supply ships from North America and Europe have to swerve out of their way just to drop things off here. Greenland isn't just remote, it's a logistical nightmare. About 17.4% of Greenlandic households live in poverty. But struggling to make ends meet isn't new here. There's few industries, a heavy reliance on imports. Greenland's been a tough place to survive for centuries. Just ask the Vikings. Oh wait, you can't. They left. Greenland's government is working to expand its tourism sector, but there's a problem. Nobody could fly straight there. Until November 2024 at least, Nuuk's new runway and terminal finally let international flights land. For the first time ever. Really step one in inviting tourism in. There's plans to open 2 more airports in 2026, including another international one in Ilulissat. That meant 141,000 visitors in 2024, mostly from cruise tourism. It might not sound a lot, but it's almost 3 times the population of the island. Tourism makes up 4.9% of Greenland's GDP. It employs 6.2% of its population. Airports aren't just handy for tourists either. They're survival tools for locals. Roads? Forget it. Greenland's longest one is only 22 miles. That was built by Volkswagen as a cold weather test track, not to help anyone get groceries. These days, tourists drive it, locals don't bother. In Nuuk, boats outnumber cars, and only 5.3% of Greenlanders even own one. And no wonder. Greenlandic roads go nowhere, literally. They exist only inside towns and just stop at the edge. Even the tarmac gives up. The options in the summer? Plane, boat, and helicopter. Pretty horrible for anyone who's a nervous flyer. Some settlements don't have runways for planes. That's why helicopters are used for the smaller areas. In winter, boats are nearly unusable because of the floating ice death traps everywhere. Snowmobiles and dog sleds take over as the main way to travel. More practical, less sinky. Don't expect to find any trains. Greenland's got less people than Flagstaff, Arizona. You don't build freeways for ghost towns on ice. Greenland's isolation makes even the internet a luxury. The island's on 2 internet cables, to Iceland and Canada. There's satellite if you're unlucky enough to live up north. The result? Internet that costs between $115 and $158 a month, nearly twice the US average. And it still buffers. Greenland's government is eyeing mining as its next big industry. Problem is, foreign powers are suddenly very interested. Nothing makes a small population nervous like realizing they're sitting on a rock the whole world suddenly wants to dig up. The island's massive ice sheet is melting, losing up to 110 million Olympic-sized swimming pools every year. That means more minerals get accessible, year by year. Greenland isn't just about oil and gas. It's sitting on a treasure chest of modern must-haves. Graphite, lithium, and rare earths. The same stuff you need for Teslas, wind turbines, and lots of military toys. Right now, China's got a monopoly. 72% of US imports, 100% of Europe's. Suddenly, Greenland looks pretty attractive. But getting to the minerals isn't as easy. Most are still sitting under ice or bedrock. The island's got a tiny workforce, almost no infrastructure, and environmental rules stricter than your mom's room cleaning checklist. And mining, that's messy. Sure, when climate change melts the ice, mining will be easy. But by then, we'll probably all be dead. Hang on. Other cold, icy places have done well for themselves. Iceland and Alaska are smaller than Greenland, yet they've got more people. Yeah, but Iceland and Alaska have something else going for them. Better locations. Alaska is an important transportation hub. FedEx has a huge center in Anchorage. That's thanks to its location near the top of the globe. Planes can get to almost anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere in 10 hours. It's also connected to the mainland. Iceland is smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic, between Europe and North America. It also has the Gulf Stream going for it. You know, that thing that keeps continental Europe way warmer than it should be? It swings by Iceland first. It doesn't hit it directly, but it does get much closer to the island. Plus, Iceland has a lot of geothermal activity to keep it warm. And that warmth lets Icelanders farm things. Also the fact that only 10 to 14% of Iceland is covered in glaciers, unlike Greenland's 80%. Iceland lucked out with fewer glaciers, so its seas aren't as clogged with floating death traps. Greenland, not so much. Even today, icebergs are still ship smashers. In just the last decade, the Mary Arctica container ship and the Tugalliq trawler both learned that the hard way. Icebergs don't just go after big ships. They also threaten Greenland's villages. If they're not drifting straight into town, they're blocking boats and making fishing a gamble. In July of 2025, in Narssuit got a reminder of just how awkward icebergs can be. One drifted into its harbor, which, for a fishing village only reachable by boat or plane, that's not great news. But 2025 was nothing compared to 2018. An iceberg weighing 10 million tons dumped itself outside town, visible from space. The whole village of 200 was evacuated. The iceberg could have caused huge tsunami-like waves. And it's Greenland, remember? There's nowhere inland for the villagers to go if that happens. Just another natural threat to survival in Greenland. Greenland didn't get Iceland's perks. No decent farmland or a prime trade location, but now the ice is melting. And suddenly, Greenland looks like it might get a growing season. Already 2 to 3 weeks longer, maybe even 100 days in the future. Which would be great, except for the whole drought thing. Classic Greenland. Droughts are causing huge problems for sheep farmers. Greenland's pastures are drying out. Sheep farms are dwindling. The country's only commercial cattle farmer, Sophus Fredriksson, summed it up. No new jobs have been created, and agriculture is on its knees. When your entire national beef industry is one guy and he's waving the white flag, that's not a good sign. There are only 38 sheep farmers in the country. Why are sheep so important? They make up 99% of Greenland's farmed meat. Without sheep, Greenland's only domestic meat production will be marine mammals and a couple of cows. So Greenland's trying a new angle: agro-tourism. Tourists hike from hut to hut, get crash courses in farming and wool making, and sometimes crash on the farmer's couch. It's all under the Wool in the North program, running across the North Atlantic. Greenland's newest problem? Wildfires. Yeah, the ice island's catching fire now. In 2017 and 2019, blazes near Sisimiut were so remote that satellites spotted them before people did. When NASA knows your forest is on fire before you do, that's not a great sign. Warm temperatures have led to more fires. On the day of the 2019 wildfire, the temperature was 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That might sound like a breezy spring day, but for Greenland, that's crazy high. The normal high temperature for that area in July is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and heat coupled with dry tundra grasses creates a tinderbox. Climate change might be giving Greenland longer summers and new industries, but it's not bringing in new residents. Birth rates are dropping, people keep moving away. By 2040, the working age population is set to shrink by 16%. Fewer workers, same amount of ice. So if you think nobody lives in Greenland now, it's going to get that much worse in the future, unless something drastic changes. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.